Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's live virtual session. Today's topic for discussion is focused on how supply partners can help in alleviating the surgical backlog. My name is Angela Douglas, and I am the Marketing Director at Medline Canada. I'm pleased to meet you here today. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items that I would like to cover. In order for us to reduce background noise and also distractions, we have muted the participants in today's discussion. We invite you, though, to use the chat function for any questions that you might have throughout the presentation today, and we will be addressing those questions at the end of the presentation today. We do also encourage you to reach out after our presentation with any follow-up questions that you might have, or to establish a meeting with us directly. Contact information will be provided in the chat function and also in an email that will be delivered to our participants today after the presentation. So thank you for your interest in today's topic, and thanks for joining us in this important conversation. As we look beyond the pandemic, there are many challenges we're facing, especially when we look at the long-term effects and impacts the pandemic has had on the Canadian healthcare system. As hospitals start to resume elective surgeries and procedures, it's estimated that it's going to take anywhere between 5 to 8 years for us to achieve pre-pandemic waitlist numbers, a significant number. The newly released Ontario Medical Association report offered solutions to tackle the surgical backlog wait times. In order to have a sustainable health care delivery system, the OMA suggests that Ontario in particular needs to have a whole of system model approach. So the pandemic has taught us many things. It's certainly primed us to be actively re-examining and reimagining the ways in which we do many things within the healthcare sector. We need to draw on ingenuity and look beyond the usual processes and policies to come up with effective solutions that also include looking to care partners, those that work in direct support of the healthcare sector, namely the supply chain. Supply chain is a crucial factor in effective health systems, yet it is often absent from conversations around addressing the surgical backlog. I'm pleased to now introduce you to Roger Bourbonnais. Roger is Medline's VP of Acute Care and Skin Health. Roger has over 20 years of healthcare knowledge and experience and brings a practical perspective into today's discussion. Roger holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Guelph and is an executive sponsor to MedTech Canada. I'd like to thank Roger for leading our presentation today. And now, Roger, it's over to you as we enter our discussion on alleviating the surgical backlog.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. And hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Obviously, my name is Roger Bourbonnais, and I'm pleased to host this session today. To reiterate what Angela was talking about, OR surgical backlogs have been something that Canadians have faced for many years. It is part of the challenge we have in giving care in our marketplace. But that challenge today certainly has ballooned. It is significant. And in the last couple of years, as we've been trying to deal with this pandemic, it's translated into a significant backlog of almost 500,000 procedures that are in various states. It's important now, obviously, that we look to how we can work together and how we can review the options that industry can provide as partners towards solving our current state. So the objective of today's discussion, and what I hope we can get out of this, is that we might be able to identify ideas around how we can tackle this problem collectively. There are things in front of us. Jointly, we should be able to come together and share that information so that we can come up with great strategies to execute, to handle this task in front of us. It is a big challenge. There is no magic bullet, no question. There's not going to be one solution that provides all of the relief that we're looking for. Policymakers today and senior officials and healthcare leaders are looking at all of the various strategies, some of which will take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of dollars in order to accomplish. Some of the activities would include transferring types of OR procedures to other subsidiary sites, site expansion planning, public and private collaborations, and other strategies designed to address staffing and resource shortages. So it is a big challenge for us. We'd like to participate in being part of that solution. So the question is, how can a facility gain an additional 3,000 to 5,000 hours of OR capacity? That's a meaningful number. And how do you do it with the existing infrastructure and the team members we have? We have the staff today, and we have the facilities in place. Now, how do we execute better? They're big numbers, but they are possible, and they're available to us if we put our minds to it. When I've talked to people in the industry and I've been presented the numbers to them about what is possible, the question often comes up is, if it is significant, why hasn't healthcare embraced it? Why haven't we seen these types of programs or programs available to us to generate these types of additional OR hours in place? And the answer is somewhat complicated. So, there is no one answer to why we haven't. Some facilities have done some of the effort behind OR efficiency practices in different areas, but many don't. And there are several reasons why, holistically in Canada, we struggle with innovation and new ideas within our healthcare marketplace. The pace at which Canada integrates new innovations and technologies can be a challenge. So what is holding Canada back? There's three areas that cover this off, whether that's regulatory process, lack of KPIs and metrics, and hospital budget silos. Although in Canada, we are very good at exporting technology, sometimes we have a hard time adapting the same technology or same ideas within our current healthcare system. If you look at the regulatory processes, our governmental processes can hinder the pace of introduction through the time and energy and resources required to meet regulatory needs. And that slows it down. In some cases, it might be that those costs are prohibitive to introduce products into our marketplace as we're not large enough to justify the expenditures. But on the flip side, it is a good thing to have a robust regulatory process. We need it. But what we find sometimes in my experience has been that we like to reinvent the wheel. And I think there's ways that government can help look to other markets that have done the groundwork, that have set the standards, and to accelerate our ability to bring those products to the market in Canada. Some of them are around the lack of metrics that we use to measure performance or outcomes. We do suffer in collecting data on how our healthcare is operating. We lack the metrics that incentivize individuals and evaluate our performance. When I say incentivize, I'm talking about giving motivation to leaders within healthcare to introduce technologies into the healthcare segment that can create whole organizational value. And then on performance, how do we measure the performance of those investments so we can rationalize and justify the investments that may come in the future? Some areas may also include that the way we finance healthcare and the budgeting process that exists. We do measure the cost of healthcare and delivering healthcare in Canada. That is something that comes up a lot, as it's the single largest expenditure that our government has. And we know how to measure it. We know how to measure what we're spending. But in that, it has created a scenario where we see silos and facilities that can also restrict innovation and the ability to take advantage of things that would have system-wide benefits. I've seen this firsthand looking at a technology that was global in its utilization, was novel, was relatively inexpensive. It had all of the supporting clinical and empirical data behind it. But for it to be successful, in solving the issue, it had to be deployed in a department that would not have experienced the improved outcomes, both in patient care or in the avoidance of additional resources, expenditures that the problem created. That creates barriers for us to introduce these technologies. When we look at ORs or surgical suites, there's another category that does impact that particular space that is also behind other markets around the world, and that's in the area of efficiency products. When we talk about efficiency products, it's a broad catch-all. It covers not only processes, technology, but it also covers products like things in the nature of kits, trays, packs, and delivery modules. Now, there are regional differences to adaptation. There's some parts of what we see in the marketplace that have done reasonably well. There's much more that we can do that's available to offer to healthcare in this category that can provide tangible benefits. It's how we look to approach this category and measure its value to the hospital and patient outcomes that needs that fresh look. There is a ton of value in efficiency products. So to gain OR surgical time, we need to look closer at several problems and solutions in the marketplace. So there's a few things to consider as you're reviewing programs designed for maximizing OR throughput. Many of you might see these and be familiar with them. Some might be new to you, but they often are forgotten after they're employed or looked at once they're shelved, once the outcomes are applied to the hospital. We need to refocus on them again. We need to look at things like ideal staff skill utilization. So we often see that very skilled individuals that provide patient care are spending too much time on non-patient facing tasks. We need to address that, to look at how we can take those that burden of those types of tasks off of their desks, off of their responsibilities, so that they're spending more time delivering care. Space and storage utilization is another key one. The movement of products, how we store them, how much we keep, where it's kept. These are all important factors that can drive efficiencies in time and how we deliver products to the marketplace, into the OR theater, in and out. Flow designs is another area of importance. How do people move in and out of the OR? How do we move products? And how do we pick and select to go into the OR so it's timely and efficient? So we're not wasting extra steps, going out of our way to capture items to brought into the OR. Product and practice standardization, that is something I think our healthcare market has done reasonably well. I think there's a lot of focus on that over the last number of years. There's still more to be done, and it's certainly much more important today, particularly if we're going to use other third-party organizations to deliver care and to take on some of these OR procedures. If we do not have good standards and practice across products and policies, we risk running into challenges in the future where those organizations that have been tasked to do these procedures are not having the same level of standard care that we'd expect to see from our acute marketplace. And the last one is looking at reducing non-value handling of supplies. We touch our goods, the products, as they come into the hospital. They are handled far too frequently, and then we lose time and efficiencies in doing so in non-value activities. So how can we reduce those activities? Each of these categories does provide and will deliver benefits in gaining time. So we're looking at time as the outcome here. But as the key, you can't look at these individually. We can't just say, I'm going to focus solely on space and storage or workflow designs. They have to be looked at as a program. That's really the power that ORs and facilities can move that needle and to gain the types of hours that I've indicated earlier in this presentation of 3,000 to 5,000 annual hours of OR capacity. Each of these activities builds on the next. So as facilities look to evaluate their surgical program, they should look at it in 3 blocks, 3 steps we describe. Obviously, we have to keep our eyes on cost. This is about maintaining improvements to our system, but not having an unreasonable burden on cost associated to it. So actual product spend, including waste reduction and value-based spending modules, they have to work for us. We have to continue to keep our eyes on that. The second is around continuous improvements. So again, efficiencies in practice, including evaluating and optimizing surgical flow, and space and standardizing and streamlined processes. Those are critical. The last is really around supply chain. So that has been the one topic that certainly has been on the tip of our tongues for the last couple of years. We've all faced the impacts on how supply chain can affect ourselves personally and in our professional business. It is an important pillar in how facilities can drive true time efficiencies and cost reductions in a facility. And without it, it can show us how quickly a facility, a hospital, and an OR can stop operating effectively. So we can't ignore the power of supply chain. We need to look at optimizing efficiencies, which creates an agile and accurate inventory level, looking at the optimization of space through space designs in the stair corridors, saves time, and find the tools, identify the tools that give better line of sight that will help with planning and avoid challenges. There are tools that let you see what your inventory positions are for certain key products that you can plan for, and you can see how you can transition your staff and make sure that they're prepared for the right cases at the right time in case there's a disruption in supply. It can be done, and it has been done in parts of Canada. It isn't theoretical. This is not some idea that was drawn up on a white sheet. It is being done all over North America as well. It's been demonstrated thousands of times in North America. And we were very fortunate a number of years ago to demonstrate the value of an operational efficiency program in Canada with Scarborough Hospital. Now, the Scarborough Hospital, I'd like to share this with you. It's about a 12-theater hospital when we did this, OR theater. As you can see from the results of this case study, we were able to demonstrate from a pre-design to a post-design some significant improvements in numbers in a lot of different areas in capturing additional labor hours. We saw almost 1,900 labor hours returned back to Scarborough for areas around case pick times, around case setup times, and then we saw significant reductions as a percentage in areas around pick time, number of items, and the case setup time. We reviewed with the facility all of their practices and surgical applications, and we determined that we could generate 90% of their surgical procedures with just 28 modules. It's a pretty substantive outcome for a project. The biggest thing is we reduced 6% in the handling of touch points. So how often we touch these products before they get to the bedside. The question I always get asked about that is that seems to be pretty robust. This process took only approximately 8 weeks to complete. It can be managed quickly, and facilities can apply these learnings rapidly. This is the power of a true integrated OR efficiency program. There's 5 elements in the surgical life cycle that make up OR efficiency. I'm going to take you through them. Each one of them has value, again, independently, but again, the power of them is that they work together in concert. Many hospitals do have some of these segments in place, some have not. In some cases, we have facilities that might be using part of the module. For example, OR packs, fairly robustly utilized across Canada, but not fully engaged. We see partial facilities. We see not all cases captured this way. We see OR packs not necessarily fully embraced of what the cost savings are associated to having efficiencies associated with them. So we're missing out on the full potential of it. To make gains that we're talking about, that we think are available to us, we need to look at our programs in all 5 areas. We need to look at them as a complete step-by-step activity, and that's the power of an integrated OR efficiency. Working on supply management is a key element. We do reasonably well in single sterile, but there's more to be done in that category. OR packs, as I mentioned, is an area that, again, is reasonably well received in Canada, but has a lot of extra value that has not been tapped into. And then the pinnacle of this is a complete delivery system, which provides the ultimate setup and teardown efficiencies within ORs today. But the most important thing in this whole 5-step process in managing OR efficiencies and delivering OR efficiencies is the clinical processes that go behind it. This is not a program or an activity that can be static. We can't just fill out the documents, apply the changes to the OR, and then walk away and expect it to work efficiently and deliver the same kind of returns time and time again. It needs to be managed, it needs to be measured, it needs to have the flexibility to be able to change as our facilities evolve. So making sure that there's a good post-review process and the ability to make changes to the system and how we deliver care is a critical part of streamlining the surgical life cycle in our ORs. So back to the original question. How can we clear the surgical backlog? So obviously, we're recommending that this is going to be we're suggesting it's going to be a blended approach. It obviously involves longer-term strategies around capital and new government policies and new spends. But we should be looking immediately at the things that are available to healthcare today. What are the tools and programs that industry have available that can be deployed quickly with minimal financial impact? They're available to us today, and we need to look seriously at them. We also should be looking at programs that are very successful in other markets and for the reasons of why they're successful in those markets. Particularly, if we look at OR efficiency programs have evolved predominantly out of markets that have a for-profit design. The principles are quite simple. The more procedures you can conduct, the more income you can generate for the facility, and the more structure there is associated to processes and standardization, the reduction of risks associated with reoccurrence and other translated infections or negative outputs from the OR. That's what drives the basic designs of these programs originally. We can take the principles of OR efficiency programs like this and apply them for different metrics here in Canada. It's about capturing those hours, getting additional OR hours, not about generating income, but how do we get access to those hours so that we can do more procedures within the facilities that we have today, within the infrastructure we have currently in place. By partnering and looking outside of today's standard practice, I think that's where we can really move the needle. And then working together on a common goal is also another area that's really important. It can't be healthcare operating independent from industry. We have to be sitting at the table because there are a lot of great ideas that we can share across the table that can get us to where we need to be, which is getting rid of this backlog in a timely fashion. I'll leave you this at the end. Achieving greater OR efficiencies is the fastest way to address the surgical backlog. Obviously, we've suggested that you can free up thousands of hours from your existing OR infrastructure with the team you have today and the infrastructure you have today, I should say. And then you can get these results early and quickly, not in years, but in weeks. Medline, as one of those industry partners, is considered the preeminent OR efficiency expert. We've done over 2,000 OR consultations across North America. We can help you in areas of reduction of spend, improving your clinical efficiencies and performance, optimizing supply chain, and ultimately getting additional hours available to facilities to do more procedures to manage the backlog we have in front of us. I want to thank you for your time. I hope that there was something from this presentation that you can take away with you as a thought that you can do things differently, and hopefully engage industry to come into your facility and identify where we can work together to achieve our common goals in reducing surgical backlogs. With that, I'd like to turn this back over to Angela. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks so much, Roger. Certainly lots for us to think about indeed. For our participants online, the chat function is operational. We do encourage you to ask your questions using the chat function. I'm just going to take a quick look at that now and see what questions we have that came in throughout the presentation. Also, I would encourage you to reach out to either myself or Roger directly following the webinar. If a question comes to mind, we'd be happy to connect with you or arrange for further discussion with you. So let me just check in on the first question that we have here. So Roger, the first question we have is as follows. In the study you referred to earlier, it sounds like a big undertaking. We have limited staff that are already overburdened. How did Scarborough Hospital manage the redesign that you described?
Certainly, it's a great question. The time when we did this case, when we worked on this project with Scarborough, it was a different time. Obviously, every OR is always stressed with the resources they have available. But what we do as an organization, what's available, we come in as a team and we do the heavy lifting. We do the assessments, we do the reviews. And really the time that Scarborough spent was reviewing the information that we'd collected on their behalf and then suggesting solutions that they could then implement. So from an engagement piece, really it wasn't a ton of extra time. Some of the key leaders within the OR would be engaged in that process, but we weren't asking the individuals within the OR environment to go and collect that information for you. We did that on their behalf.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Again, if you are on the chat function, please just insert your questions into the chat function and we'll be collecting those now. I do have one other question here though, Roger, and it is as follows. Do you know of any government funding that might be available to support implementing site redesign, education of staff, and auditing of existing practices in the OR?
I don't know of a specific program that would be that laser focused in the funding model, but I know that there are certain funding elements that the government, both provincially and federally, are looking at on how they can resource internally. There are certainly funds there. I know they're putting a lot of funds into it. I just don't have the design specifically down to outcomes. Happy to connect with anybody after and discuss further. We can certainly point you in the right direction where you can get that answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't mind adding a little bit to that also, Roger, in that the OMA study, the Ontario Medical Association study that we referenced earlier in the presentation, does have quite a lot of additional information in it that might be valuable and useful to individuals. So we can certainly send the link out for that study as well, because it does have a section that talks to some funding opportunities as well that might be interesting for folks. Um, I'm just checking one more time. Uh, that seems to be the questions that we had for today. So in closing, unless I see anything else come through the chat right now, I wanted to thank everyone for the time that they invested in this conversation today. We'll be sure to follow up if any additional questions do come through the chat in between now and the ending of this presentation. We'll be sure to follow up with those. And then also, as I mentioned earlier in today's discussion, if there's other questions that you have after today's presentation, please do feel free to reach out to myself or Roger. We will be following up for all the attendees of today's session with an email with some contact information in it for you that we can share, and feel free to follow up. And we'd be happy to arrange some time and actually cover any questions that you might have. So thank you for your engagement today. Please do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Roger, for hosting today's session. Much appreciated. And thanks so much for Medline Canada.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for your time today.